For 25 years, I lit a candle every October 3rd for my daughter who died in a hospital fire. Last month, she knocked on my door. Alive, breathing, and calling me Dad. My name is Roland Thatcher. I'm 58 years old. And until that November night, I was just another broken father living with a ghost. You might pass me on the street in Fairmont, Indiana, and never know I once had a daughter named Melody, who died when she was 6 months old. Or so I believed. My ex-wife Diane and I buried an empty casket in 1998. The fire at St. Joseph's Hospital was too intense, they said. Nothing left of the 7 infants who died in the pediatric wing that night. We divorced 2 years later, unable to look at each other without seeing our failure to save her. I left that town in fragments, moving from one small job to another, carrying a grief so heavy it made every step feel like walking through water. Friends drifted away, and family learned to tread lightly around me. I became a man who smiled, nodded, and said the right words while my heart stayed in ashes. But last month, a 25-year-old woman stood on my doorstep in the pouring rain. She had Diane's brown eyes, my stubborn chin, and the exact same face as my late mother, Ruth, when she was young. The resemblance was so striking, I actually stepped backward when I saw her. "Dad," she said. That single word shattered 25 years of grief. I stared at her for what felt like hours, rain soaking through my coat, and tried to reconcile the impossible. What she told me next changed everything. She hadn't died in that fire. She had lived hidden from me, protected by secrets that no parent should ever have to carry. And for 25 years, I had mourned a child who was standing right in front of me. The first moments after she spoke were surreal. I wanted to ask 100 questions at once, but the words stuck in my throat. How could this be? How could I have spent 25 years believing my daughter was gone when she had been alive all along? My mind raced, trying to find some logical explanation, but there was none. Melody stood there, rain dripping from her hair onto the porch. She looked nervous, hesitant, as if stepping into my life after a quarter-century required permission she wasn't sure she deserved. I wanted to grab her, to hold her close, but I froze. I didn't know if I was allowed to feel joy, or if that emotion had been locked away by 25 years of grief. She spoke slowly, almost whispering, her voice a mixture of fear and hope. Diane had kept her hidden. She had given her away the night of the fire, claiming she had died, and had arranged for her to be raised in another town, under another name. The doctors at St. Joseph's were told she hadn't survived, and no one had ever questioned it. No one except Melody herself, as she grew older and began to wonder why she had no memories of her early months. Why no one ever mentioned me, her father, for years. She pieced it together quietly. She learned who I was, traced me through old letters, public records, and small-town whispers. And then finally she decided it was time. Time to confront the truth. Time to meet the man she had heard stories about. The man whose heart had been broken by a tragedy he never caused. I finally found my voice. "Why now?" I asked, my hands trembling. "Because I had to know the truth for myself," she said. "I had to meet you. I had to see the man who loved me, even though he thought I was gone." We sat on the porch, the rain still falling lightly, as she told me her story. Every detail was heartbreaking and miraculous all at once. She had been raised by kind strangers who never told her who she really was. She had grown up feeling incomplete, sensing a gap in her life she couldn't explain. And through it all, she had carried my name in her heart. I listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes just staring at her, trying to memorize every feature, every inflection, every hint of the girl I had once cradled in my arms. And in the middle of it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Hope. Real hope. Before we move on to what happens next, take a moment. Comment below where you're watching from. I want to know you're here with me. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories like this. By the end of that evening, it was clear. Our lives had been rewritten. Not erased, not lost forever, but paused. And now the story of a father and daughter, separated by secrets and lies for 25 years, was just beginning again. The days after Melody returned were a blur of disbelief, questions, and cautious joy. I kept expecting someone to knock on my door and tell me it wasn't real, that the past 25 years had been nothing but a cruel dream. But every time I saw her, every time she spoke my name, I was reminded that she was really here, breathing, alive, and my daughter. We spent hours talking, filling in the gaps of 2 separate lives that had somehow stayed connected by an invisible thread. I learned about the town she grew up in, the foster parents who had loved her, the schools she attended, and the friends she had made. I learned about the moments she had wished for a father, moments she had quietly hoped I was alive somewhere, even though she had never met me. It wasn't just joy that filled these conversations. There was grief too. Grief for the years we lost, the milestones we missed, the birthdays, the first steps, the first words. I had missed so much of her life, and though I wanted to hold her, to reclaim every second, I realized that time was gone. What we could do now was make the most of the future. There were also questions I had to ask carefully. How had Diane hidden her? Who knew? How had she stayed safe all these years? Melody explained, her voice steady but cautious, that Diane had made sure she had everything she needed to thrive, but had told her a lie about me, twisting a tragedy to control the narrative. Melody had lived with a split identity, feeling love from the people around her, but always sensing a hole in her heart. One evening, we walked through the old neighborhood where I had lived with Diane and her for a brief time. The memories were heavy. I remembered the fire, the sirens, the smoke filling the halls of St. Joseph's Hospital, and the emptiness of the casket we had buried. Seeing the streets again, with Melody by my side, made the grief feel almost tangible, like it had a weight we both could carry together. And yet, there was laughter too. Small moments, the kind I hadn't known in decades. A joke about her stubbornness. A shared memory of a story I once read to her. Her correcting me on a detail she remembered differently. Those small pieces built bridges across decades of lost time. Before we move on to what happens next, take a moment. Comment below where you're watching from. It helps me know you're with me. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Through it all, I realized something profound. Love doesn't vanish just because circumstances do. Even after 25 years, it waits patiently for the right moment to resurface, stronger than before. And for Melody and me, that moment had finally arrived. The first week after Melody arrived, our house felt unfamiliar. Every corner seemed to carry echoes of the past, the toys I had once imagined she would play with, the nursery walls I had painted, the quiet evenings I had spent hoping she would walk through the door someday. Now, she was here, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. We didn't rush anything. I didn't want to scare her away with too much enthusiasm, and she didn't want to overwhelm me with too many questions. We started small, breakfast together, cups of coffee at the kitchen table, talking about her favorite foods and music. We laughed at little things, like her inability to make scrambled eggs without burning them, or the fact that she remembered my old high school jokes better than I did. These small moments were gold to me, tiny treasures of connection I had thought I'd never experience. But the past wasn't far behind. Every time I looked at her, I saw glimpses of the baby I had lost. The tiny fingers, the round cheeks, the spark in her eyes. It was all there, and I grieved again for the years that had been stolen from us. Grief and joy became intertwined, a knot in my chest that only grew tighter with every shared memory and every new story she told me. We started going through old photographs. Some were of her as a baby, the few I had kept after Diane's betrayal. Others were of her childhood, from foster parents and family friends who had sent her pictures over the years. She laughed at some, cried at others, and I found myself holding her hand tightly, feeling a bond that had been invisible but never broken. Melody told me about the nights she had wondered if her father was alive, about the dreams she had of me, and the longing that had never left her heart. I told her about my own nights, the tears I had cried alone, the candles I had lit every year, the moments I had whispered her name into the empty darkness. It was during one of these conversations that I realized something important. We didn't have to recover all 25 years. We didn't have to recreate them. What mattered now was building the future, one day at a time, with honesty, love, and patience. As the sun set behind the old oak tree in our yard, Melody leaned against me and whispered, "I'm glad I found you, Dad." And for the first time in a quarter century, I believed it was true. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel for more true emotional stories like this, and comment below where you're watching from. That night, as I watched her sleep in the room I had prepared decades ago, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Melody was home, and nothing could ever change that. The days that followed became a careful dance of rediscovery. Melody and I were learning each other again, like two strangers who shared the same blood. Every conversation revealed pieces of her life I had never known. The schools she had attended, the friends she had made, the little quirks she had developed in my absence. She told me about the foster families who had raised her, the small acts of kindness that kept her hopeful, and the nights she cried herself to sleep wondering if her father was out there somewhere. I listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes silent, letting her words wash over me. I had waited 25 years to hear them, yet even now they felt surreal. We took walks through the neighborhood, the streets that once held only memories of loss now carrying new possibilities. She noticed the bakery we used to visit, the park where I had planned to take her on her first birthday, the old library steps I had imagined her sitting on as a child. I could see the past reflected in her eyes, the memories she didn't have, and I longed to fill those gaps with love and attention now. Melody wanted to understand everything about me as well. My life after Diane left, my regrets, my loneliness. I told her about the nights I had spent staring at the empty crib, imagining her tiny hands in mine, imagining the laughter that never came. I told her how I had built my life around grief, carrying her memory like a fragile, precious object, not realizing she was out there, alive, waiting for me. There were moments of tension too. She asked questions I had no answers for. "Why didn't you fight for me?" she asked once, tears welling in her eyes. I had to swallow hard. I explained that Diane had been persuasive, manipulative even, and that for years I had been powerless to change what had been done. I told her I had never stopped thinking about her, never stopped loving her, and that nothing could ever erase the bond we shared. We also laughed. She had an infectious sense of humor, sharper than I remembered, and we shared stories of our separate lives, finding joy in the little absurdities that came with growing up. It was as if time itself had warped, condensing decades of missed moments into a few precious days. And yet, there were challenges. Melody had built a life, routines, and friendships without me. I had to respect that, while still carving out a place in her world. It was delicate and often exhausting, but every small victory felt monumental. A smile, a shared meal, a quiet conversation before bed. Before we move on to what happens next, if you're enjoying this story, take a moment to subscribe for more real-life emotional stories and comment where you're watching from. By the end of that week, something incredible had begun. The distance of 25 years felt smaller with every laugh, every story, and every quiet moment shared. Melody and I were no longer separated by a fire or by lies. We were two people rediscovering the love that had never truly disappeared. Weeks turned into months, and Melody's presence began to reshape my everyday life. The house, once quiet and echoing with empty memories, now vibrated with her laughter, her stories, and even the occasional disagreements. Each day, I was reminded of the weight of the years we had lost, but also of the opportunity to make up for them now. We started rebuilding traditions we never had a chance to form. Saturday mornings became our special time. She would wake early, and we would make pancakes together, experimenting with different recipes, sometimes failing spectacularly, but always laughing. These moments were simple, yet they carried the weight of decades of missed mornings, of birthdays without candles, of nights spent wondering if we would ever see each other again. Melody was curious about everything. She asked about my childhood, about her mother Diane, and about the stories I had imagined telling her when she was a baby. I shared my memories cautiously, knowing that some truths were heavy, that the past had its shadows, but believing that honesty would strengthen our bond. She listened intently, asking questions, teasing out details, and occasionally rolling her eyes at my dramatics. There were also moments of tension, as we confronted the reality that life had moved on without us. She had built a career, friendships, and habits that didn't include me, and I had to learn to step into her life without overwhelming her. There were evenings when she would retreat to her room, and I would sit alone in the living room, feeling the bittersweet ache of loving someone you never fully knew. One rainy afternoon, we went through the old photo albums I had kept hidden for 25 years, pictures of the hospital, the fire, and a few blurry shots of her as a baby, given to me by distant family. We laughed at some, cried at others, and reflected on how strange and beautiful life could be. Melody noticed the resemblance she shared with my mother and smiled, a gentle acknowledgement of our family's continuity. She confided in me about her fears too, the uncertainty of reconnecting, the possibility of being hurt again, and the anxiety of integrating a father she had never really known. I held her hands and assured her that nothing could take her away now, that no one could rewrite the past, but together we could shape a future we both deserved. Before we move on to what happens next, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, real-life stories and comment where you're watching from. By the end of that month, I realized something profound. We had survived the impossible, the fire, the lies, the years of separation, And now, Melody and I were not only reunited, but we were building a life together, one day, one memory, and one moment at a time. The foundation of trust, love, and understanding we were creating was stronger than anything I could have imagined, and I knew it would carry us through the years to come. The following weeks were filled with discovery and surprises. Melody and I learned how much we had in common, and how much we were different. Her personality was a mix of curiosity, independence, and determination. Traits I remembered from my own childhood, yet shaped by a life I had never known. Each conversation became a journey into who she was, who I was, and how our lives could intersect after 25 years apart. We spent long evenings talking about her education, her career ambitions, and the experiences that had defined her. I was amazed by her resilience, the way she had faced uncertainty and loss with strength and grace. She shared stories of foster families who had loved her, teachers who had inspired her, and friends who had become her chosen family. Listening to her, I realized that despite the gap of decades, she had built a strong, independent person who was ready to embrace our reunion. One afternoon, we went to visit the old hospital site where the fire had occurred. It had been renovated, but the memories lingered. I explained what had happened that night, how the chaos unfolded, and how Diane had convinced everyone she had died. Melody listened quietly, absorbing every word, her hand gripping mine tightly. There were tears, but also a sense of closure, a recognition that the past could not define us any longer. We began building new traditions together. Every Sunday we cooked dinner, sharing stories and laughter over meals. We explored the town she had grown up in, visiting places she had always wondered about, places that now felt like bridges between our lives. Melody also met old friends and distant family members, carefully reconnecting and integrating into the parts of my life she had never known. There were difficult conversations, too. We had to discuss Diane and the choices she had made. Melody was conflicted, angry, and hurt, and I had to navigate my own feelings while supporting her. We agreed that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but that understanding and moving forward were essential. These moments, while painful, were part of the healing process, helping us rebuild trust and connection. Through all of this, I realized something crucial. Love is patient, enduring, and resilient. Even after decades of separation, the bond between a father and daughter can withstand the tests of time, distance, and deception. Melody's presence reminded me that life could offer second chances, that the heart could heal and grow stronger even after unimaginable loss. Before we move on to what happens next, I want to pause and say, if you're watching this, subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories, and comment below where you're watching from. It helps me know we're sharing these moments together. By the end of this, I understood that Melody's return was not just a miracle of survival, but a chance to rewrite our story. Together, we were creating a life filled with laughter, understanding, and love. A life that no fire, no lie, and no lost years could ever take away. The weeks that followed became a rhythm of discovery, patience, and cautious celebration. Melody and I were learning each other all over again, adjusting to the nuances of personality, preferences, and habits that had developed independently over 25 years. Every moment felt fragile yet priceless, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. We started spending time doing things we had only imagined in the past. Saturday mornings became sacred. Pancake experiments, coffee, and long conversations that stretched into hours. I watched her laugh at little mistakes, and it reminded me of the child I had thought I'd lost forever. It was astonishing how a simple shared activity could carry the weight of decades of missed moments. Melody shared her life with me in small doses. She told me about her friends, her favorite books, and the life lessons she had learned while growing up without me. She described her first heartbreak, her triumphs, and her disappointments. I listened intently, sometimes nodding, sometimes pausing to let her words sink in. Every story she told added layers to the daughter I had never fully known, and every detail helped us form a connection that felt both new and familiar. There were hard conversations too. She asked questions about Diane, about the fire, and about why she had been told I was gone. Her voice sometimes quivered, her eyes filling with tears, and I had to swallow the lump in my throat as I explained the truth. The lies that had been told, the mistakes made, and the love that had never wavered. I reassured her that no deception could erase the bond we shared, that despite the lost years, we had now found each other. We explored our town together, visiting parks, the library, and local cafes she had often wondered about. Melody found joy in simple things: the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of children at the park, the feeling of sunlight warming her face. I realized that these small moments were healing, not just for her, but for me as well. We were reclaiming pieces of life we had missed and slowly weaving them into our present. Before we move on to what happens next, I want to say, if you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel for more real-life emotional stories, and comment below where you're watching from. It means a lot to share these moments with you. As the days passed, the bond between us deepened. We learned to communicate in ways that transcended words, through shared glances, small gestures, and laughter. Melody was no longer the child I had imagined, but the remarkable woman who had survived unimaginable circumstances. And I was no longer a father haunted by loss, but a man privileged to witness the return of his daughter, alive and whole, ready to build a future together. The following weeks became a delicate dance between past and present. Melody and I were learning how to live together as father and daughter, while respecting the lives we had both built independently. Each day brought small victories, shared meals, laughter over childhood memories she never experienced, and quiet moments that seemed to say more than words ever could. We revisited old places from my past, trying to bridge the gap between the life I had imagined for her and the life she had actually lived. The old park where I had planned to teach her how to ride a bike, the library where I had dreamed of reading bedtime stories, even the hospital steps where she had supposedly perished, all became part of our journey toward understanding and healing. Melody absorbed these stories with curiosity, sometimes wide-eyed, sometimes with a wry sense of humor. She also introduced me to parts of her life I had never known. Friends, mentors, and colleagues she had grown close to over the years became part of our expanding world. I saw her strength, her resilience, and her compassion in action. I realized she was a person who had survived incredible adversity and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more empathetic than I could have ever imagined. Of course, there were moments of tension. Melody sometimes struggled with the idea of suddenly having a father after so many years. She had fears, doubts, and insecurities. Understandable, given the weight of her own experiences. I had to learn patience, to listen without judgment, and to give her the space she needed to process her emotions. Each challenge, however, brought us closer, teaching us both the value of trust, forgiveness, and understanding. We also began making plans for the future. Small things at first. Weekend trips, family dinners, even the idea of celebrating birthdays together after decades of absence. These plans were symbolic, representing a commitment to each other and a desire to make up for lost time. Every shared laugh, every story exchanged, every comforting hug became a thread in the tapestry of our renewed relationship. Before we move on to the final chapter, I want to say, if you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel for more incredible true life stories, and comment below where you're watching from. Your support helps keep these stories alive. By the end of this period, I realized something extraordinary. Despite 25 years of separation, the bond between a father and daughter had not only survived, but it had the potential to grow stronger than ever. Melody's return was a second chance, a chance to create memories, to build trust, and to love without fear or regret. And as we looked toward the future together, I knew that no fire, no deception, and no lost years could ever take away what we now had. The day came when Melody and I officially marked our new beginning. It wasn't a grand ceremony or a lavish event, just the two of us in the living room, surrounded by old photographs, letters, and the quiet comfort of shared understanding. We laughed, we cried, and we held on to each other, knowing that every moment counted now. I reflected on the past 25 years, the emptiness, the grief, the missed milestones, and I realized how much stronger we had both become. Melody had survived unimaginable circumstances, and I had endured the heartbreak of believing my daughter was gone forever. Yet here we were, together, reclaiming what had been lost. We made promises to each other, to communicate honestly, to create new traditions, and to never let the distance of the past overshadow the love of the present. Every day became a chance to write a new chapter, one filled with laughter, shared stories, and the quiet peace of being reunited. Melody's presence reminded me that life is fragile, unpredictable, and full of second chances. It also reminded me of the importance of holding on to hope, even when all seems lost. The fire, the lies, the years of separation, none of it could erase the bond we shared. Before I finish this story, if you're watching this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life stories and comment below where you're watching from. Sharing your support keeps these stories alive. As I watched Melody leave that evening, I knew our journey was just beginning. We had survived the impossible, uncovered the truth, and rebuilt a bond stronger than any obstacle. And for the first time in 25 years, I felt whole again, knowing my daughter was truly back where she belonged, by my side.